Hello, my baby gorillas! Don't know where that music's coming from. Turn my back against it all. Was a living here, sex crime. Enough of that. Here we go. Talking about sex crimes or fake sex crimes, orchestrated fake sex crimes, as the case may be. Alex Salmond inquiry, Nicola Sturgeon's husband, Peter Morell, I don't know why they've got separate names, snubs second chance to clear up evidence. Oh, I think that was because he might have been up for perjury. That's quite interesting, isn't it? If you're up for perjury, then you can just snub actually being in the coming back to the parliament. That's quite interesting. Let me just get your comments up, guys, and see what you're saying. So, snub's second chance to clear up evidence. Oh my goodness. It was all meant to be clear and transparent. I have nothing to hide. Nothing, not a sausage, not one thing to hide. Well, my husband might, but I have not got anything. I was not in the WhatsApp groups. It was other people. I didn't know what was happening, even though all these people are connected to me. I haven't got a clue what's happening. But we're honest and transparent. We have nothing to hide except for the Vietnam WhatsApp group, which is causing us problems, and the fact that we ignored the advice of the legal attorney entity who was advising us, oh, nothing to do with me, look over there, look over there. You must think we're stupid. Nicola Sturgeon's husband has refused to clear up his controversial evidence to the Holyrood inquiry into Alex Salmond's affair by appearing before it tomorrow. Oh, SNP Chief Executive Peter Morell was recalled last month and asked to appear on the 26th of January or February the 2nd, but has snubbed both dates after taking legal advice. In case you might be, think you might be perjuring yourself, Mr. Morell, or your wife. Don't think you should go. Is that the legal advice? Is that how it went? The Scottish Tories accused him of treating the inquiry with complete contempt. With nothing to hide, nothing to see over here. Oh, but you are treating it with complete contempt by refusing to even turn up after having to take legal advice because the inquiry thought you were perjuring yourself or your wife was lying. It's very difficult. This the latest refusal has been snubbed. Has raised doubts about whether he will ever comply with the inquiry's request to give further testimony. Well, I would suggest that there has to be legal redress at this point if he refuses, i.e., he has to do it in a court of law. And that's where I think that should be the next stage. If he refuses to come back, he has to do it in a court of law. That's the next stage, or should be the next stage for this inquiry. If this isn't a legal step in the Scottish, giving evidence to the Scottish government, that should be the next step. They would then have to do it in front of a judge. Perfect intro. Thanks very much. I thought it was quite funny. I thought it was quite amusing. So, the Tories accused him of treating the inquiry with contempt. Oh, the latest refusal has raised doubts about whether he will ever comply with the inquiry's request to give any further testimony. Given it is fast running out of time, I don't think there should be a time limit on it. I think it should be get to the bottom. So now the public want a public inquiry into this because there's implications between the civil service, the government, the police, the Crown Office, and the alleged victims. And there has to be a public inquiry now into this, which I'll get on to in a minute. That's what the Scottish people want. Mr. Salmond is due to give oral evidence in person on the 9th of February. So I would suggest to guys that might be a date where we actually get together, if you know what I mean. And Miss Sturgeon is scheduled to be the final witness on February the 16th. Well, I'll be pitching a tent outside the Parliament that day. It is possible Mr. Morell could yet squeeze in to give evidence on the morning of February the 9th. So Mr. Salmond and Mr. Morell going to get a big blow up ring and fight it out in the middle of this ring in the Parliament. It is possible Mr. Morell could yet squeeze in a date and ahead of Mr. Salmond's afternoon appearance. I think there needs to be a public inquiry into this. However, his resistance to date and involvement of lawyers suggest that increasingly unlikely and that he may have to be charged with perjury. There's the read more. Nicola Sturgeon's husband may not return to Alex Salmond inquiry after perjury row. So I would suggest that he might have to answer this in court in the perjury situation. That's what I would suggest. That this is now gone beyond the rudimentaries of the parliamentary inquiry and now has to go into criminal proceedings. Mr. Morell was severely criticised, I would suggest. If you do things criminal, you should be severely criticised, allegedly. Criticised after his evidence to the inquiry in December, in which he made a series of contradictory statements under oath that contradicted his wife, who's a lawyer. My goodness, I would hate to see the conversations you have in that house. It prompted Labour to ask the Crown Office to investigate whether he had perjured himself. Well, if the Crown Office is implicated in this whole scenario, I wouldn't be asking the Crown Office. Is the Crown Office now being able to give an objective appraisal over what's actually happening? We've got the poor guy Craig Murray and going to potentially get 2 years in jail just now because of fake perjury allegations. So there's obviously something wrong with the Crown Office as well. In particular, the Crown was asked to probe whether Mr. Morell falsely denied the existence of potentially embarrassing text and WhatsApp messages relating to the orchestration of Mr. Salmond's false sexual allegations. Love to be a fly in the wall for that one. I feel like bet Joanna Cherry's watching your channel right now. Joanna and I don't go on, but you should look at what the Guerilla TV channel have been doing on young Joanna Cherry. I'm sure she will. Willfully making false statements and false allegations is all starting to mash into one, isn't it now? We're seeing the machinations of false statements and covering up and blaming journalists and not taking any responsibility, and the Crown Office being implicated and they might not want to get Mr. Morell to actually face justice under these perjury charges because the Crown Office might be implicated in it. Oh, come on! Willfully making false statement under oath is punishable by up to 5 years in jail. Now, they're trying to jail Craig Murray for 2 years, but punishable by 5 years in jail, Mr. Morell. That's how transparent Nicola Sturgeon's administration is. Sturgeon's top aide get rid of evidence after code of conduct complaint. Oh my God, the code of conducts are coming out thick and fast, isn't it? Now, Nicola Sturgeon has already broken the ministerial code because she pursued the investigation by Alex Salmond on Alex Salmond, even though the legal documentation, the advice from the legal advisor said for her not to do it. So she has broken the ministerial code, which says you're not meant to do that. So that's her. She should resign now anyway. She's banking rights on that alone. Never mind the potential criminal side of this. The inquiry is looking at the Scottish Government's mishandling of the complaints of sexual misconduct made against Mr. Salmond in 2018 by 2 female civil servants. The former First Minister had exercise set aside in judicial review showing it was tainted by apparent bias or was orchestrated and criminal. That's another way of saying that, I think, leaving taxpayers with a £500,000 bill, it's more than that, it's nearly £250,000 bill in legal costs. He was later charged with sexual assault, but cleared on all counts at a trial last March. Last week, the Crown Office it was forced. Don't forget, the Crown Office, who were implicated in this, were refusing to hand over the legal advice because of pressure from the First Minister. So whether or not the Crown Office could be objective about whether to handle Mr. Morell actually having perjured himself in front of the Parliament is subjective now. And we might have to look at other people coming into the Crown Office to actually be more objective than the current situation with Lord Advocate James Wolfe. And Mr. Salmon's criminal trial to the inquiry after MSPs asked to see WhatsApp text. Now, as far as I'm aware, the WhatsApp text messages and the text messages haven't came out into the parliamentary sphere with regards to Mr. Morell and Susan Ruddock. So these have still to come out, and I believe this is the Viet Cong group that have actually set up this group on WhatsApp, and all the messages are there. They've got all the messages, and this is going to blow it right out of the water. This is my setup. Don't forget, Mr. Morell has said that he was trying to get allegations down in London, and somebody else says that we're going to get him. We're going to talk about Alex Salmond, and if we fail. So there was a number of people, and all of whom are involved in this conspiracy. Mr. Morell's deputy SNP chief operating officer Sue Ruddock, who I was down complaining about the other day that she's part of this orchestration. The economic guru says party lacks honesty and clear purpose for India. Well, Mr. Morell sent Miss Ruddock texts urging police. That to me is criminal right there. Mr. Morell sent Miss Ruddock texts urging police and prosecution actions. This is the Crown Office. Action against Mr. Salmon on the day he was cleared with the assault in January 2019. So let me read that again. Mr. Morell sent Miss Susan Ruddock texts urging police and the prosecution, so the police and the prosecution, the Crown Office are involved, against Mr. Salmon. So they're working cohorts here against Mr. Salmon on the day he was charged with assault in January. So the day that they're charging assault. Now, as far as I'm aware, the thing in London, which was a non-case that the person didn't come forward, that still went into the papers. So they were still trying to smear him in the papers, although the person who was meant to be involved in the victim in London didn't come forward, but that was still put into the papers. As far as I can remember correctly, Mr. Morell has insisted under oath no more messages exist. So there, right there, if the Vietnam group then shows that there's more messages, that's him bang to rights. That's a criminal offence. It'll be done in the court for perjury, but we already know there's a problem with the Crown Office. That's why Mr. James Wolfe will have to resign. And I don't think it's Nicola Sturgeon that should be appointing the new, because she's implicated in this, should be appointing the new Lord Justice or Lord Advocate. Let me just continue this. However, the previous contradictions in his evidence have not inspired confidence on the inquiry. Tory MSP Murdo Fraser said Mr. Peter Morell's refusal to reappear before the committee will only raise more suspicions about what he doesn't want to answer about this case. So it's coming right out and right out. More things are coming out. Boom, 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 boom. We're transparent. Oh yeah, it's all coming out now. The First Minister promised that the SNP would be open and transparent. I'm going to show you something that will show that this is going to come back and bite her right in the ass. The First Minister promised that the SNP would be open and transparent with this inquiry, but now the chief executive of the SNP can't bring himself to be questioned again. Oh, come on! And that's what Nicola Sturgeon said. Nicola Sturgeon said, "Oh, I've got nothing to hide. Oh, it's really bad. There's a cover up, and oh, it's something else. I meant to cover up and meant to be an Alex Salmond's side." Nobody's buying it, Nicola. We're not all stupid. His previous appearance was littered with contradictory statements, which is why he should have been willing to clarify his evidence. Exactly. Mr. Morel is showing complete contempt towards the committee and must make himself available for questioning as a matter of urgency. The SNP have been asked for a comment. 87 comments. Let's see if any of these can be read. Damning for Morel, for Sturgeon, for the whole rapidly unravelling SNP scamming of the Scottish people with instant lies and half truths about economic repercussions and of independence. Implosion of the ugly populist nationalism is having, and it's long overdue. We possibly look at what happened at the top of the SNP and think that they are in any way fit to represent Scotland. Opposition party committee members have been fishing expedition which has become months-long sea trawl. Both Nicola Sturgeon and Alex Salmond, the target catch, naive for anyone to think otherwise. Oh my goodness, these are all Scottish names as well. Sturgeon thinks the hardcore vote is in the bank. Treating them like sheep could in fact backfire on her. Yeah, I wouldn't underestimate the Scottish people. It would be hugely incredible if one person voted for the SNP after the disaster they have created. This year's first candidate for the grossly exaggerated Post Prize. Don't get that. Oh, but sacking Cherry has already led to an exodus of more intelligent sheep. Yeah, a lot of people are going to the Scottish Libertarian Party. The thing about it now is if all the SNP members left and joined the Scottish Libertarian Party, the Conservative Party would not have an argument to say that it was once in a generation vote, because the Scottish Libertarian Party never said it was going to be a once in a generation vote. So because of the transfer of people from the SNP to the Scottish Libertarian Party, then they could actually ask for another referendum. So that if you're really interested in independence for Scotland, just all jump ship and join the Scottish Libertarian Party. So that's very interesting. Let's see my pal Georgie Porgy. Where are you, Georgie Porgy? I saw you, I had you there a wee minute ago, Georgie. Where are you, buddy? Oh, Georgie Porgy, I had you, buddy. Where are you? Oh, there we go. Let's see my pal Georgie Porgy. So let's get this up. Hello, Georgie. Hope you're well, buddy. This is Georgie Porgy's new party. Workers' Party. Workers of the world. Unite. You have nothing to lose but your jobs.
Alex Salmond was framed. He was framed in the most foul way by his own party, the governing party in Scotland, the SNP, party which he had led.
See, I mean, George talks a lot of sense a lot of the time as well. George has got limitations in economics because he is a socialist, but he does make sense, and he's completely correct here.
And which forms a government that had been first established by him. And they conspired together.
Sturgeon, the tyrant, is keeping us in our houses forever and is putting more taxes on alcohol. Nothing to start to conflict with the Scottish people in tax and alcohol?
A small circle.
That's
For those of
majority.
you, and I know there are many, again, I could show you my scars, who say things like, well, 14 women couldn't have made that up.
So I think Craig Murray found out who these women were, and they were all linked to Nicola Sturgeon in some way. So it was like a big lesbian, intersectional, feminist, men-hating cabal, which other women can see right through. These are a twisted minority of very strange types of women.
Well, it depends who the 14 women were,
That's right,
doesn't it?
George. You tell them.
And if you knew, which you cannot know, because of the laws on anonymity, then you'd conclude, as I did.
So that's another problem. So we'll have to look at anonymity, being anonymous in court if you're an accuser. I don't think that's correct.
Long ago, and Craig establishes in his
He's talking about Craig Murray, who's now up in jail, up in court, which I was there trying to cover his case for up to 2 years in jail because he exposed the whole conspiracy by Nicola Sturgeon and her husband.
affidavits today that a conspiracy was hatched to send Alex Salmond to prison, and but for the good sense of a Scottish jury, the majority of whom were women.
So the majority of whom were women. So this is women actually working out that this is obviously a setup, which is tremendous credit to the jury.
Salmond was acquitted on all counts.
Because they wouldn't have known at the time, they would have just heard the evidence. When I heard that, it sounded like a lot of nonsense as well, mind you. So it was quite transparently nonsense. This is why it's going to come back and bite Nicola Sturgeon. Because there needs to be charges now against the people who have made the allegations.
And therefore, the fuse was set for an explosion which is now occurring and which will destroy the premiership of Nicola Sturgeon and her oleaginous husband, the chief executive of the SNP. They will be gone very soon. If not this week, then the week after.
Yeah, that's it. Thanks, George. Thanks, my pal Georgie Porgy. So, Alex Salmond inquiry, Nicola Sturgeon. Did Nicola Sturgeon break the ministerial code? So it's all coming down. This is a wee bit older. This was the 26th, so we're a wee bit further on than this. Did Nicola Sturgeon break the ministerial code? Well, we know the answer is yes, because she went against the legal advice. And by going against the legal advice, she broke the ministerial code. So she should resign. That's her. And she could be forced to resign. Yes, that's correct. Thanks for agreeing with me, Evening News. Holyrood Inquiry is now using legal powers to seek documents from Crown Office, which we've already got. So that's a wee bit older there. That's a wee bit older. So we'll close that one. So here we go. Alex Salmond Inquiry set up to fail. Now this is why we need a public inquiry. Where is it? Where did that go? Here we go. So the case for a public inquiry. So we've got a parliamentary inquiry, and we require a public inquiry now. And this is from Stephen Daisley, DAISLEY.com. And the case for a public inquiry. This was done on February 1st. Now, we definitely need it setting up a public inquiry because this goes into the police, the public, the civil servants, the government, the Crown Office, and also the accusers. We need to have a public inquiry that encompasses all of these things. And I'll come back to that there needs to be some sort of legal representation in the public inquiry as well. So that's Stephen Daisley. I think that's how you say it. And the case for a public inquiry, editor, February the 1st, 2020. So there's Nicola and Alex. Sometimes there are breaking points that can't be ignored. The inquiry into the Scottish Government's handling of sexual harassment allegations against Alex Salmond has just suffered another low, dispiriting week. That does not distinguish the past 7 days from any others since the committee began its work, but the accumulation of indignities and inadequacies has become too great to bear. The parliamentary investigation has revealed only how weak and ill equipped is the Parliament leading it. Somehow, the Scottish Parliament has managed to cast more doubt on its own fitness than that of the government it is tasked with reviewing. So, there's obviously weaknesses in the parliamentary inquiry process. After months of pleading for the inquiry, from the inquiry, convener Linda Fabinini, the Crown Office finally agreed to share further materials with the committee. So there's obviously a problem in the Crown Office, I've already said that, with our committee. And only after Holyrood was forced to take the unprecedented step of invoking powers under the Scotland Act to demand sight of the documents. So I think there's obviously too close a relationship between the Crown Office and the government, and the Crown Office has not been objective. That's why I think Mr. James Wolfe will have to resign. The Parliament it sought were only minor in their nature. So the materials it sought were only minor in their nature. They included any digital communication between the Chief Operating Officer of the SNP. I would suggest we need to suck in all manners of materials. Everything that's relevant to this case must be sucked in to this public inquiry, which is not available just now. But this is definitely what we should be getting, a public inquiry. Officer of the SNP and Scottish Government, and any documents to the 2018 disclosure to a newspaper of harassment complaints against Salmond. Only now, in these days of this probe, have the MSPs normally returning it to be to it being given access to these productions. Only now, in the dying days of this probe, have the MSPs normally running it been given access to these productions. I don't know, that's a bit weird. Anyway, there are conscientious MSPs on the inquiry, and they have done much and very credible work to get to the truth. But their efforts have been hindered by the nature of the committee itself. Fascinating. Of the 9 members, 7 have no legal education or training, including the convener. They asked questions that the parliamentarians would ask, some of which are incisive, but most of which lack the necessary forensic depth to interrogative nuance. Lawyers can be nuanced but they are a valuable nuance. Sorry, a nuisance. Sorry, nuisance. Sorry, lawyers can be a nuisance, but they are a valuable nuisance. They know what questions to ask, of whom, in what order, and how to elicit answers, or damn the witness who failed to provide them. They do not greet forgetfulness or inconsistent evidence with arched eyebrows and exaggerated sighs. Interesting. They are adversarial because, in their profession, what is at stake is typical a person's liberty and reputation, or the doing of justice itself. Law is not a process that can end in wrong hands and focus group apologies. The respect respected legal academic Alistair Boddington, which I'll go into in a minute, notes that a strong suspicion that his committee was given the job precisely because it would have insufficient expertise or powers to investigate adequately. So the respected legal academic Alistair Boddington notes a strong suspicion that his committee was given the job precisely because it would have an insufficient expertise or powers to investigate adequately. Professor Boddington is not alone in his view among legal experts. The committee appears not only to be fatally flawed, but flawed in such a way as to raise questions about the motive behind establishing a parliamentary probe rather than a robust inquiry, which we need to have an inquiry. It's now past the probing stage. It's a long time since people have probed deep enough into this, and we have to have a deeper probe. Whatever the diligence of its members, this inquiry is not robust. Well, then we need to have a robust inquiry into this, don't we? It's precise. Previously had to suspend its activities because of what is termed obstruction. The First Minister, who promises to fully cooperate with the committee and its inquiry, has instead tendered, tendered evidence arising from a forgotten meeting and at odds with the evidence of the SNP chief executive and her husband Peter Morrell. So they're both saying different things, which is probably why Peter Morell's up in perjury. Our government has refused to hand over its legal advice, which we now know should not have been taken forward in the first place, and let witnesses appear. So I would suggest that then it has to go to a court where if there's a requirement to call witnesses that they have to appear, or they're committing some sort of perjury. Where it has come before the panel, it's repeatedly had to revise its evidence despite having spent £55,000 of taxpayers' money preparing civil servants to appear. So they're getting prepped on how to speak to the inquiry. And the government might be involved in this. The Holyrood inquiry has already failed before it has concluded. In truth, it has failed even before it began. Every day, or more specifically, every Tuesday, the MSPs continue to participate in these empty theatrics. And is another day in which we get further from, not closer to, the truth of what happened. Yeah, we need to get to the truth. It's very important. A faulty process does not more than fail. It reaches an outcome. Sorry, a faulty process does not more than fail to reach a just outcome. It makes it more difficult for a thorough process at some point down the line to do so. To do so either. Poison roots can only ever produce poison fruits. Oh, very interesting. The only way forward for the Holyrood inquiry is to be dissolved and for a parliament to pass legislation requiring ministers to establish a judge-led public inquiry, which is exactly what we need into this entire saga. This is not about party politics or constitution. It's no longer simply about Alex Salmond and Nicola Sturgeon. It's about public confidence in the integrity of the Scottish Government, the nature of which is being alleged or at least heavily implied is impossible to overstate. The nature of what is being alleged or at least heavily implied is impossible to overstate. In his most recent submissions, Salmon claims to have a witness who was told by a special advisor in 2018 the government knew they would lose judicial review, which we already know, but they would get him, i.e., Salmon, in the criminal case. So that's the cat right out of the bag. I mean, there's too many various people coordinating with these sexual allegations. Every one of these people need to be in front of the inquiry. Salmon loyalist and East Lothian MP Kenny McCaskill asserts the existence of a secret WhatsApp group, which is out again, nicknamed Vietnam Cong, the communist, in which senior SNP figures allegedly discussed putting pressure on one complainer, which again is Orchestration, to give evidence against the former party leader at the criminal trial, at which he was cleared of all charges. McCaskill claimed the group chat discussed how to get the complainer back in the game. I mean, how do you get somebody who's making sexual allegations back in the game unless you're trying to orchestrate it? It is this, in its simplest and most emphatic terms, the proposition here is that the Scottish Government conspired politically against the former First Minister and employed the apparatus of state to carry out its dastardly plot. The mere the mere insinuation, regardless of the veracity or otherwise, is sorry. The mere insinuation, regardless of its veracity or otherwise, is incendiary. I am surprised that Sturgeon hasn't had Salmon and Murray knocked off for interfering in her dictatorship. How is she supposed to rig the May election if she's overthrown? Sturgeon the tyrant is keeping us in our houses, however, forever, and is putting more taxes on alcohol. Where are we? The implication were such a narrative to be confirmed or given the impression of confirmation would be to make Watergate look like two-bit hotel burglary by comparison. So this is massive. This is why we need a public inquiry, guys. Get writing to your MSPs. The Scottish Parliament is not capable of reaching the truth of this matter. Informal information central to the events under investigation, information without which it is impossible to fully understand what is alleged to have happened, cannot be divulged to the public. Much of the evidence heard would be better assessed by those learned in the law. A public inquiry could be given an expanded remit into the police, into the Crown Office, into the government, into the civil service, and into the complainers. Given an expanded remit beyond the narrow terms stated for the Holyrood Committee, it could integrate all sides and all evidence with the rigour that has been lacking so far. Completely correct. It could give the public confidence with a process that is robust, disinterested, and unbound by parliamentary timescales or political considerations. That's what Mr. Ross has to start pushing for as well, and all the other four parties or three parties, three parties. Fabinini, Fabinini's committee has reached a breaking point, and so has the indulgence. The rest, so has the indulgence, so has the indulgence. The rest of Parliament can continue to grant it. An inquiry designed as an exercise in damage limitation cannot and will not get to the bottom of the events in question, not because the committee members do not want to, but because the scope of the process is too restrictive. Oh my goodness. Cheers, Guerilla. Thank you. Thank you. Much about this inquiry seems recondite to the public and far removed from the everyday concerns. People are getting on with their lives. We know that this is happening, especially in the middle of a pandemic that wee nippy has got us all locked in our houses. But neither public apathy nor legal complexity should stand in the way of answering the most vital questions. Are public officials in Scotland above accountability and even the law itself? And the answer must be no. The only forum in which it can be ensured is a public inquiry. Thank you very much. Originally published in the Daily Mail, Letters, Scots Letters, insert at dailymail.co.uk. That is brilliant. There's Mr. Murray up in court. Look at this poor man. An elderly gentleman getting harassed by Nicola Sturgeon. Nice guy. He's getting up to potential 2 years in jail. He's Craig Murray, craigmurray.org.uk, and he's on trial just now. I feel very sorry for him. Just about ready for my trial. Tried to come see Craig. I wish he'd got in contact with me. Just about ready for my trial for contempt of court tomorrow. Signing off a final affidavit in a minute. It is really difficult to get my head round the fact that I could very soon be jailed for up to 2 years for writing about the conspiracy to fit up Alex Salmond with fake sexual allegations allegedly orchestrated by wee nippy Sturgeon, and reporting honestly and carefully at his trial and face an unlimited fine. Oh my goodness, how barbaric. Oh, one wants to touch it because they are all dirty. No, what's that? Oh, no one wants to touch it because they all have dirty hands. Oh my goodness, go and have a look at Mr. Murray's site and send him all your love. You can send him a wee message, donate. He's got, I think, the Defence Fund to date has raised £112,000. These bloody lawyers are making a fortune. We have paid the legal team £61,500 to date and have a new fee note details over £75,000. I have to calculate the exact sum, but I believe it's about 25,000 of this is already paid. In addition, so go down here and donate, guys. If you're on my baby gorillas, go down, donate here for this gentleman. He's an ex-ambassador for the country as well. It seems like a good egg. So I expect final costs of 160,000, possibly substantial, and possibly substantially so. This is a huge amount to try and raise from my readers. It's a major indictment of our legal system that there is so ruinously expensive. Yeah, so go and help. I'll go and donate some money as well. Alex Salmond is an innocent man left and costs of many hundreds of thousands of pounds. Alex Salmond is an innocent man left with the cost of many hundreds of thousands of pounds. So we need an overhaul of our judicial system. These lawyers are making a fortune out of this racket. The Crown has dragged out the case over a series of preliminary hearings, classic state lawfare tactics, and my lawyers have kindly capped or reduced their fees. If I do not genuinely believe that important issues of freedom of speech are at stake, I would not ask you to contribute. I would only point out that these are circumstances. Everything helps, and large bulk of the funds have been raised for many thousands of small contributors. So, guys, if you can donate, I don't ask you for money, but if you can donate to Mr. Murray, although you can donate to me in the bio, put some money in my account. But I don't ask for any money, guys. I don't do anything like that. Although it has cost a lot of money to get this operational. But I would say to donate to Mr. Murray to make sure he's helped out. Nice man. That's Nicola again. Oh, there's wee Nippy there with our nasty friend. Let's look at this. Oh, Nicola Sturgeon's top aide deletes tweet after code of conduct complaint. Oh, there's a surprise, eh? Oh dear, we didn't see that coming. Nicola Sturgeon, this is the woman I've been talking about. He looks a nasty type, nasty woman. Not the nice ones. We all like the nice ladies. This is by Tom Gordon, Scottish political editor of the Herald, it looks like. So let's have a wee look at this wee nippy and our nasty fat pal. Nicola Sturgeon's top aide has deleted controversial tweet attacking Boris Johnson after being accused of violating her code of conduct. This is the one that's complicit in the orchestration of Alex Salmond. This the fat one here. This one here. Nasty. So they two are orchestrating it together. They're part of the overall orchestration team. So Liz, this woman's name is Liz Lloyd. Hi there, hi John, how you doing, mate? So Chief of Staff Liz Lloyd, who is also involved in the orchestration of the false sexual allegations of Alex Salmond, took the action after being reported to her boss by the Scottish Tories, not like the Tories to stick here, who claim she was guilty of a clear and flagrant breach. The government said she had done so of her own volition as a courtesy. The Tories said it was typical of the SNP to get rid of evidence and pretend it never happened. Oh, yeah, I think they're alluding to what's happened with Alex Salmond. On Thursday, Miss Lloyd tweeted about the Prime Minister's visit to Scotland later the day, which the First Minister had complained was non-essential. Mr. Johnston's visit to the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital in Glasgow and a vaccine plant in Livingston as part of a broader effort to promote the union amid the pandemic. Miss Lloyd, I don't know why all these women are called Ms. Lloyd wrote to her personal Twitter account, "My family don't live in Scotland." Oh well, that's good for them. I'm not being able to visit them since August and some since 2019 because it's important we stay in our homes, except the lady that travelled up and down with coronavirus on the train and don't travel. Yet the PM come to Scotland when he could see the vaccine rolled out and thank the army by Zoom not essential. However, SNP government's code of conduct. I don't think this is the only thing that Liz Lloyd's broken about the code of conduct. Special advisors which enforced by however, the SNP government's code of conduct for special advisors which enforced by the First Minister bans statements on political controversy, including on social media. Oh, there we go. Oh well, you just seem to be ignoring the codes anyway. You don't seem to be living by any codes anyway. When Nicola Sturgeon couldn't even spell Livingston right, some journalists, yeah, well, no hummer, no hum. I think you meant Humza, Aberdeen, no Humza, no hum. It says no hummer. So special advisors must take public part. Special advisors must not take public part in political controversy. Although Liz Lloyd is also involved in the Alex Salmond debacle conspiracy. So she's part of the cabal, the lesbian intersectional feminist cabal, that Marxist cabal that's around Nicola Sturgeon. They must observe, through any form of statement, whether in speech or letters to the press or books or social media articles or leaflets. They must observe discretion and express comments with moderation, avoid personal attack, and would not normally speak in public for a minister or for the Scottish Government. Special advisors normally speak to the media on behalf of Miss Sturgeon. Yeah, so that's where I don't know if it was Liz that was actually advising the the press about the fact of the setup of Alex Salmond. So Tory MSP Miles Biggs subsequently complained to the Scottish Government top officials, Permanent Secretary Leslie Evans. There's another name for you, saying the tweet was the opposite of the discretion and moderation required by the Code of Conduct. It has emerged that Ms. Lloyd has deleted her tweet, suggesting it was problematic. So I mean that's pretty. It's not really that interesting a story, but it's certainly. But here we go. Here's something interesting. Let's have an enlargement of this story, shall we? Nicola Sturgeon is facing a vote on claims she misled Holyrood over Alex Salmond inquiry, and our old friend Paul Hutchins, the Guerilla TV's good friend Paul Hutchins, and he journalist of the year 1985. Brilliant guy, no problems with Paul whatsoever. Nicola Sturgeon faces vote on claims she misled Holyrood over the Alex Salmond inquiry. Boom! And I think there is maybe a majority, if the Greens vote against her, that she will be found guilty and will have to resign. Nicola Sturgeon, I would wait for this vote till after the inquiry is finished. That's what I would have done if I was political engineer. I'd wait till after Alex Salmond's um, speech at the party, or Nicola Sturgeon speech at the Parliament, um, which I would hope was put up on the internet, and Alex Salmond's speech at the Parliament before I would do the actual vote. Nicola Sturgeon could face crunch vote over claims she misled MSPs on the Alex Salmond inquiry. She's going to have more votes against her than I care to mention. She's already broken the ministerial code and should resign for her not taking the parliamentary advice, sorry, the legal advice not to persecute and prosecute Alex Salmond. But obviously, if she was doing it for as a political vendetta, then she obviously wasn't going to do that. The Scottish Tories have threatened to table a motion unless her husband, Peter Morrell, gives evidence to the committee again. So they're forcing her to come back. Her husband will bring her down, apparently. I don't think it's not just one thing, there's multiple things that can bring her down. Her husband's evidence, the fact she didn't take legal advice, the fact she lied to Parliament, the fact it's not just one thing. The fact that this may become an inquiry, a public inquiry, that this might actually become criminal. So there's multiple things that are going to destroy this, as our pal Georgie Porgy actually said. The party leader Douglas Ross said the SNP cannot dodge scrutiny forever. Either the SNP chief executive faces the inquiry or the SNP leader needs to apologise for misleading Parliament, because she said they were going to be open and transparent and they were going to actually come and be in good faith to the parliamentary inquiry. So this is why this has to become a public inquiry now with lawyers. A Holyrood committee is investigating how the SNP government mishandled the orchestrated the sexual misconduct complaints against Salmond when he was First Minister. This is where we have to get the inquiry. The former SNP leader took the government to court and it was accepted the internal probe had been unlawful. Unlawful. So that again should be resigning. The former SNP leader took the government to court, Nicola Sturgeon, to court, and it was accepted the internal probe was an orchestration helped by Nicola Sturgeon and others. Had been unlawful. The fiasco ended the long-standing friendship between Nicola Sturgeon and Salmond. Yeah, if you're getting fitted up for an orchestration of fake sexual allegations to destroy your life, that usually is a damper on somebody's friendship. Whose allies believe he was the victim of a plot? He was 100% the victim of a plot. There's no doubt about that now at all. The inquiry has focused on the government, but senior figures like Morrell, who is the SNP chief executive, have been part of the probe. The probe needs to expand. Lloyd, let me just get the names out. Susan Ruddock, Liz Lloyd, Leslie Evans, Judith McKinnon. That's just the start of them. and there has to be expanded out into civil servants and the people who made the allegations. The anonymity will have to be retracted. We have to find out if there's a connection between them and Sturgeon that Craig Murray has basically said there is. And George Porgy alluded to as well, my pal George, in earlier oral evidence in an earlier oral evidence session. Morell was asked about the meeting between Salmon and Sturgeon during the government's investigation. He was also quizzed about a WhatsApp group apparently convened after Salmon won the judicial review and whether he used the messaging platform. Morell's answer, because this is him perjuring himself if he's lying to the Parliament, this then becomes a criminal matter. Obviously, we know that there's a problem with Lord Advocate James Wolfe, and he can maybe conduct himself in a neutral way, a neutral manner. He might be shilling for the government. The Morell's answers were criticised by some members of the committee, but he declined to give evidence again today. Nothing to hide. We've got nothing to hide. That was Nicholas. Nothing to hide. We're totally transparent. Although your husband now doesn't wants to decline to give evidence and might be up in perjury and charges. Nothing to hide. This was in spite of Sturgeon saying in 2019 that her government and party would cooperate fully. The Tories have given Sturgeon an ultimatum by saying they will table a potential damaging motion if her husband refuses to reappear. Ross said, that was his second name, Ross said, Nicola Sturgeon promised that her party would cooperate fully with the inquiry. If the SNP chief executive won't even show up, that promise has clearly been broken and she has misled the Scottish Parliament and the Scottish people. Nicola Sturgeon can change this. It's her party. The chief executive works for her. She should demand he shows up, at least shows up. The Scottish Government has been contacted. Here's another one. What's this? MSN. Conor Matchett. Tories demand SNP chief appears at Alex Salmond inquiry or face vote. So this is right out as well. There he is there. That's his face when he found out that they had found out that he had been trying to orchestrate false sexual allegations in London against Alex Salmond. Morell on Monday declined an invitation to appear in front of the committee again after he was asked to return due to concerns he gave testimony that was clearly at odds with other evidence. Clearly at odds with other evidence. This is we have to have a public inquiry now. On October the 1st last year, Holyrood, the First Minister said the SNP have had no involvement in the Scottish Government complaints process, but the SNP will also put forward answers to the questions that the committee asked of it and has already done so. As anybody can go to the committee's website and see with their own two eyes, it will continue to cooperate fully. Mr. Ross said Nicola Sturgeon's promise that her party would cooperate fully with the inquiry. If the SNP chief executive won't even show up, the promise has clearly been broken. And she has misled the Scottish Parliament. Oh dear. Alex Salmond inquiry that was set up to fail. This is in the MSN, this is in the Scotsman. Brian Wilson. In the case of Alex Salmond versus the Scottish Government, an ongoing inquiry, I recommend the article by Alistair Boddington from the Legal Review, Scottish Legal Review. Alistair Boddington summoned inquiry reflects poorly on Scottish democratic traditions, just like Humza Useless. This is fantastic man, Mr. Boddington. And there never has been a clearer case made out for the utility of law and lawyers than the so-called summoned inquiry in the Scottish Parliament. The committee on the Scottish Government handling of harassment complaints. So I think Mr. Boddington is also asking for a public inquiry into this absolute abomination. The committee on the Scottish Government handling of harassment complaints, to give it its correct title, has thus far failed to unearth the truth about the machinations within the Scottish Government, quite simply because isn't equipped to do so. Inevitably, there is a strong suspicion that this committee was given the job precisely because it had insufficient expertise or powers to investigate the orchestration of false sexual allegations against Alex Salmond by Nicola Sturgeon, allegedly. The committee members appear to have worked extremely hard to carry out their task, but without counsel to their inquiry, indeed not even a legal assessor assisting them, they have no chance of digging to the bottom of this very, very murky affair that Nicola Sturgeon set up, allegedly. The revolving door system for many witnesses is just pathetic. Even Nicola Sturgeon's husband, who might have committed perjury, doesn't even have to come back to this committee. No requirement for him to come back. The witnesses gave evidence. The committee subsequently discovers that it is nonsensical, so they could just say anything, which they've been doing. They've been taught by £55,000 of taxpayers' money. The civil servants have been taught what to say to the committee. That's why we need a public inquiry. The committee subsequently discovered that it's nonsensical and so recalled. Sorry, the witness give evidence. The committee subsequently discovered that it's nonsensical and so recalled that witness. In some cases, more than once. Salmond was a threat to Sturgeon failed leadership. She had to do something about it. About that. That's correct. That's exactly what it was. Alex Salmond was far better a first minister especially on domestic, regardless if you're a unionist or a nationalist. They was far better domestically than Nicola Sturgeon's been. She's been a disaster. That's probably why as well, because I think we all knew that anyway. In Glasgow Sheriff Court, where I used to practice as a boy lawyer, I don't know how clever this guy is. A boy lawyer? I've never heard of that before. This guy must have been like Dougie Hauser or whatever. These witnesses would have been locked up for prevarication at best. Yeah, get them in jail. Get them in jail. They've been trying to put everybody else in jail. Get them in jail. The Scottish people demand it. Public inquiry. Get the lawyers out. Some people would be facing perjury, like Nicola Sturgeon's husband. Perjury prosecutions. The fact that people in very senior positions in the Crown Office, in the civil servants, in the government, in the police, and the workers who made the allegations in the Crown Office again, who have now been found not to be proven. The fact that people in very senior positions are advancing at best amnesia. Oh, I can't remember. Oh, I can't remember that. Nicola Sturgeon, I can't remember that meeting with Alex Salmond in March. That's convenient. And at worst, idiocy as explanations for their failure to tell the whole truth makes me one wonder if we have in Scotland a team of total diddies at the top. Well, is that not the case? Is that not the case, guys? Let me know your answers. Do we have diddies at the top? The discovery that £50,000 of public money was spent by the government coaching these witnesses to talk nonsense before they appeared uh, before the committee is hugely suspicious. What do you think? I guess that doesn't fit into the huge overall orchestration by Nicola Sturgeon of setting up Alex Salmond with these fake sexual allegations. And this is another wee piece in the jigsaw, isn't it? I'm sure there must be a better phrase than training for lying to describe the disgrace that is Nicola Sturgeon's governance in Scotland. But at the moment, I can't think of it. I'm sure there must be a better phrase than training for lying to describe these, but at the moment, I can't think of it. How devastating is that with the people at the top in Scotland? Perhaps the biggest hint that the whole inquiry was to be a farce was the arrangement whereby it only sits on a Tuesday afternoon. Yeah, because they've got so busy. They're so busy on a lockdown, these MSPs. How effective can it be? Yeah, that's why there's a requirement for a public inquiry now. Public inquiry, right to your MPs, public inquiry. We all want a public inquiry into this. How effective can it be if it can only sit in such bizarre, intermittent fashion? Undoubtedly, this government imposed schedule is aimed at making sure that its report is much delayed. The First Minister's assurance at the outset that her government would do all they could to assist the inquiry has proved to be empty promises. The all too obvious truth is that her government has made Herculean efforts to frustrate it at every turn. First Minister's assurance at the outset that her government would try and cover up as best as possible the orchestration of false sexual allegations against Alex Salmond, would do all they could to assist the inquiry has proved to be empty promises. Lies, I think the word we're looking for. That all too obvious truth is that her government has made Herculean efforts to frustrate the parliamentary committee at every turn. To use lawyers, of course, the most absurd aspect has been the claim from Miss Sturgeon and her deputy, John Sweeney, that it is impossible for them to afford the committee sight of the legal advice, which is now out, which she shouldn't have taken the case to trial, given, and the Crown Office is obviously implicated in this as well, to the Scottish Government in respect of and being compromised, in respect, allegedly, in respect of the salmon matters. It is confidential and so can't be divulged. They protest what utter nonsense. The Scottish Government are the client and can waive the privilege attached to the legal advice. Let me just read that again. It is confidential and so can't be divulged. They protest. What utter nonsense. The government, the Scottish Government, are the client and can waive the privilege attached to the legal advice whenever they choose. In advancing such an absurd explanation for secrecy, they must take the view that the Scottish public are public are exceptionally dense. They all think you're stupid and you're not going to understand the fact that Wee Nippy could have released the documentation months ago. In advancing such an absurd explanation for secrecy, they must take the view that the Scottish public are extremely dense and will believe anything that they are told to do, like stay in your house and don't go out for a flu that's got a 99.9% chance of being successful or surviving, sorry. Another odd part of these proceedings is that the legal approach taken by James Wolfe, the Lord Advocate, has appeared in front of the committee and made the assertion that for anyone to produce the documentation, originals or copies from Mr. Salmon's criminal trial would amount to a crime and they would be prosecuted for doing this. Mr. Lord Advocate James Wolfe's position is untenable and she should tender his resignation. Mr. Wolfe says he must have some of these documents in order to give evidence. Mr. Salmond says he must have some of these documents to give in order to give his evidence, which is completely correct, and he should be given these documents as well. That's why has been slow to appear before the committee. Now, I would not pretend to have anywhere near the erudition of Mr. Wolfe, but I have never heard of such a law. So Mr. Wolfe's just making up the laws, is he, as he goes along? The criminal trial, Mr. Wolfe has to go, is completely completed and can't be reopened. What possible crime can be committed by a legitimately constituted parliamentary inquiry seeing these documents? We need a public inquiry, not a parliamentary inquiry, and we all need to see these documents, which on any view, not just Mr. Salmon's, must be must be pertinent to the work of the committee. The Lord Advocate is really on the terms of S162 and 6163 of the Criminal Justice and Leasing Scotland Act 2010. I respectfully question if he is correct. Firstly, S162 doesn't appear to cover the accused productions. Secondly, I can't believe that this section completely prohibits criminal trials, productions for legitimate use in other proceedings. In short, that would be absurd and would create an impediment to proper inquiry in other proceedings. In all court proceedings and even the parliamentary inquiries, the aim is to discover as much truth as possible. These sections can hardly have the purpose of these sections can hardly have the purpose of frustrating that aim. They have to be interpreted accordingly. This move to keep the criminal production secret has nothing to do with the identification of the female complainers, which I think we need to actually know who the female complainers are just now in the Salmon trial. They need to potentially have prevent the course of justice. She's a global shill, yeah, she is global snake, yeah, she's global shill, mate. I advised the BBC and also many newspapers for years, and simply editing techniques will overcome this problem, so that cannot be prayed in aid as an excuse for keeping the documents from the committee. I can't help noticing that the present Scottish government seem to be very good at disappointing inquiries, all of which reach the conclusion that the government has behaved splendidly throughout. Yeah, that's why we need a public inquiry in this one. My own recent favourite was the inquiry into the release of the COVID patients from hospital into care homes. The inquiry concluded that it was possible to say that the patients were the cause of the spread of COVID within these homes. So it must all have been a coincidence. So, who would have thought that? The Scottish government took off Scottish government off the hook yet again. That's why we need public inquiries. After 7 months of its existence, the committee decided on the 22nd of January this year to use Section 23 of the Scotland Act to try and force Crown Office to disclose internal inter-ally documentation from the criminal trial. So we have now have the prospect of edifying spectacle of one arm of the Scottish government being improperly pressurised by senior figures on the political side of the same government to keep the requested documents from the committee at all costs. Stalinist way, after all, is the SNP's modus operandi. Presumably, the underlying intention in the Salmon saga is that the committee will be unable to say very much about anything because it will never see the most telling piece of evidence. That evidence, certainly politicians fervently hope, will remain under wraps in control of the Scottish government at a time when the processes of the democratic states are being tested and reviewed all over the world. Scotland has shown that it simply isn't up there and in the running. Of course, as an independent nation, Scotland has no democratic traditions. Still, one might have hoped that the passage of time would have made Scottish political leaders aware of the advantages of proper constitutional setup. But the experience of the Salmond inquiry demonstrates that Scotland remains firmly in the dark ages. It's perfectly plain that our leaders are very frightened that the truth might emerge. We are entitled to ask why. Mr. Boddington is a former honorary professor at Glasgow University School of Law. Very prestigious. Excellent article. That's us, guys. Hope you enjoyed that. Love my baby gorillas. I've got more to go. I've got Mr. Murray's what Mr. Murray sent. So we're looking forward to telling you about that as well. Vietnam was the name of the cabal because the content of the messages was napalm. Napalm. That's excellent. Well done, made me laugh. Love my baby gorillas. I'll be on soon again. Don't worry.